There's something about Bethesda games. It's a familiar story. Oh, Bethesda has a new game out, maybe I'll give it a try. Fast forward to 6 days later, my apartment's a mess, I haven't slept, and my job thinks I'm dead. But also, invariably, after spending a good 100 hours in that world, I wonder, was it worth it? Does being addicted to a game make it good? This happened to me with Fallout 3. I was in one of my worst apartment situations, but my TV was in my bedroom so I could play Fallout 3 all the time. Then it happened with Skyrim. I decided to try it just after trying Skyward Sword and completely forgot about Skyward Sword. Then it happened with Fallout 4, and now with Starfield. A man in Russia literally tried suing Bethesda for making games that were too addictive. Bethesda produces games that make the hours melt away more than most games. How do they do it? And in the end, is it worth it? The first time booting up Starfield, the music creates this sense of potential, unbridled discovery. I'm getting goosebumps right now writing this script. And this is true of all Bethesda games. Fallout, Skyrim, all have amazing soundtracks that beg you to explore their endless worlds. And that's intoxicating. You want to start playing and get right to exploring the far reaches of space, the wasteland, or Tamriel, but trying to do any of the cool stuff is met with skill locks or scarce resources. The upgrade tree is massive with at least 10 must-upgrade skills, and features like the shipbuilder took me 5 tries and 2 YouTube videos before I finally understood what I was doing. So far I've logged 37 sleepless hours in Starfield, and it's all I can think about. Just like with Fallout 3, just like with Skyrim, just like with Fallout 4, it's quite literally an addiction. I just made a video about why channel surfing, endlessly swiping through Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok is addicting, and what it does to the content. It makes it worse. But what about Bethesda games? There's no doubt I get hopelessly addicted every time. There's something about the gameplay loop that's perfectly tuned to work with our brains to make us wanna. For a deeper dive, watch my last video, but essentially, our brain's reward chemical is dopamine. It provides the wanna feeling about anything you do. I'm getting the wanna about making this video, but it's massively conflicting with the wanna I'm getting from wanting to play Starfield. Dopamine is strongest not when we get a reward, but when there's the promise of a reward. And in a Bethesda game, it's essentially one big tangled web of wanna. At its most basic, every new planet, outpost, abandoned research facility, or sign of life is a chance for a valuable reward in the form of loot. The loot might be mid, but it also might be game-changing armor or contraband you can sell for tens of thousands of credits. That's key to the release of dopamine. If the reward is the same every time, the dopamine slows down. But if we get a huge reward once, then random rewards after, with the possibility of another big score, the dopamine spout turns on full blast. And even if the loot isn't great, you still got experience points which you need to do cool stuff. Because that's the other side of dopamine, delayed gratification, working towards something that takes work to get. And they do not give away skills easy. Each skill point you spend gives you a small iteration to your character. So Bethesda works on both these aspects. Whether it's perks, skills, dragon shouts, power armor, a space helmet, or an epic axe, Bethesda knows what they're doing. Another aspect of dopamine release is that it craves novelty. It's one of the reasons humans have been so successful as a species. Exploring our planet and beyond has been a primary human driver for centuries. And Bethesda games are huge. Filling out a map is a draw that is undeniable, especially in Starfield, with completely different planets and species to discover. Columbus sailed across the Atlantic because his brain was wired to crave new experiences, and now you're grav jumping to the Sol system to see about titanium mining. And invariably, in every Bethesda game I've played at least, that wanna feeling reaches an apex that drops off completely. Can a game I breathlessly played for 60 hours be bad? I think partially it has to do with that moment that I've gotten to in every Bethesda game where I discovered that this far-off planet I just reached has an abandoned chemical factory that's exactly like one I've seen before. Or in Fallout 4, this raider camp looks just like the last 5 I already found. The game loses its appeal fast, because like I said before, if you get the same rewards over and over, see the same things, if it's not a novel experience, your brain stops responding so strongly. So Bethesda has to stop that from happening by heavily restricting you early on, being able to harvest planets for resources but then being constantly held back by not having enough lubricant or adhesive, or my ship doesn't have enough cargo, or I don't have the right skill leveled up, keeps me from discovering sameness and drives that feeling of wanna. It's not like other games aren't so addictive, but in Bethesda games, you're living in a world where you can do your own thing, make your own money, so it's potentially endless. I was addicted to the System Shock remake, but then it ended. I was addicted to Hollow Knight, but I wasn't spending whole days playing, just whole nights. When that ended, I played it again. I was addicted to Resident Evil 2 Remake, Resident Evil Village. I like being addicted to games. But a major difference between Bethesda games and all the other games I get addicted to is Bethesda games always end up empty. I'll never forget the moment in Fallout 3 when I started to get that feeling. There was a quest that had me traveling to a scary abandoned factory with a lot of ghouls. This was supposed to be one of the scarier quests in the game. When I finally got to the last room of the factory, there was a bobblehead. Cool, but surely there would be more. There was a note. I read the note, and that was it. After that, I sort of saw through the game and I stopped playing shortly after. The most common complaint about Bethesda games is the hollowness that eventually sets in. When you realize that the game actually isn't as deep as you thought, it's just big. It's like eating a lot of pizza. We know it's empty, but while we're eating it, we don't care. It's only when we realize we ate 3 pies that we think, maybe I should reflect. A game like Zelda, or a game like Hollow Knight, for instance, rewards you for getting better at it, like actually getting better at it. There are bosses that are difficult, but you learn what they're going to do and you can counter them, and you're proud of yourself for learning and progressing. In a game like Hollow Knight, you get the experience points and actually play better. In a Bethesda game, your character gets better, not you. Sure, you get better at shooting, but the game is so much bigger than that, and the shooting battles eventually feel the same. There aren't any climactic boss battles with patterns to learn, just bigger hordes of enemies. And the basic gameplay loop also starts to get old. I grew up on adventure games. The basic gameplay loop of an adventure game is inventory-based puzzles. Basically, you have to figure out which item in your inventory or which combination of items solves the puzzle to move the story forward. Silent Hill games, Resident Evil games, lots of games have this style of puzzle. These games are like a salmon fillet. You eat one piece and feel good about yourself. You figured everything out on your own and the puzzles were deep, because in a Bethesda RPG, you just have to figure out how to get to the objective marker. That's it. That's the puzzle. It's rewarding because your character gets XP, not because you feel good that you figured it out. It still delivers you the dopamine, but it's a little more hollow. Last month, I was obsessed with a different game, the System Shock remake. This was a very faithful and great remake of a first-person shooter that came out in the early 90s. And games in the early 90s didn't hold your hand. At all. I had to read every note to see if there was a clue. I had to listen to every dialogue to make sure I didn't miss the info that led me to the next part. This game is so keen on making you play it, every code and puzzle is randomized so you can't look for a solution online. I felt stuck a lot, but when I figured something out, it felt good. I felt connected to the world because I had to pay attention, checking all the nooks and crannies for clues or else I wouldn't progress. Enter Bethesda RPGs. You don't have to read a single note or listen to a single word anyone says in the entire game. The basic gameplay loop is essentially click through dialogue or open a note until a new objective appears, go to objective marker, click on objective, get next objective marker, rinse and repeat. It's a giant game of tag with side quests that make the game of tag easier. In some ways, I like this. Dialogue in games is often boring and stiff, and I want to be able to click through it, especially in Bethesda games. No storekeeper introduces themselves to a customer like they do in a Bethesda game. NPCs on the street will talk about their problems out loud to no one as you walk by. I often wish NPCs were more normal, just more casual. It feels too much like we're in a game where everyone only exists to give me quests. And that's unfortunate because I want to care. I feel like I'd like the game more if I cared. But maybe that's not the point of a Bethesda game. Maybe the point is just to live, to exist in this world for a little bit, to do things you could never do in real life. The characters are just vehicles for you to go to new places and see more of the world that Bethesda has built for you. To be fair, I like Bethesda games. They just have other ways of making you interact with the world, like with their persuasion minigame in Starfield that I still don't quite understand. Their digipick minigames to unlock safes. Sometimes you make decisions to side with one character or another. You can choose to just kill everyone or try to talk your way out of it. You can start a mining empire or spend hours in the shipbuilder. You can just follow the main quests or wait until you're 100 hours in. I've been having a lot of fun doing non-quest things, finding planets, scanning the creatures, trying to get it 100% explored, building outposts, mining minerals so I can upgrade my items more, and that's the addictive part. The quests are really just the syringe. Inside the syringe is the XP, the scarce resources, upgrading the skills, making sure you have enough cargo. So, when designing a game over at Bethesda, is getting you addicted the point? Or is it just a consequence of the kind of game they're building? And if that is the point, does that make the content worse? Would the world be more interactive beyond picking up junk if a goal wasn't for the world to be so immense? Would the quests hold your hand less if the point was to build up your skills more than to build up your character's XP? Would NPCs act more normal if the goal wasn't for you to have thousands upon thousands of quests to choose from? Or is it a more valiant goal where they just understand how brains work and they want us to get hooked on playing long enough to be able to actually experience these worlds they built? We all have busy lives, and Bethesda games tend to rip us out of them. The promise of novelty, rewards, all that, there has to be more because we devote a lot of our time to these games. If and when we discover the emptiness, it almost feels like a betrayal of those first few orchestral notes, calling us to adventure. What did we just spend all our time on? But this is the paradox of open-world life simulators. Life, generally, isn't satisfying. Life doesn't wrap up in a narrative bow. What satisfies us are not empty calories like Bethesda games provide, but narrative arcs. There's simply too much going on to have an impact the same way something like The Last of Us has. Too much choice. Maybe it's too much like life. But as long as you know that's what you're in for, it's a fun journey to get there. Alright, I'm gonna go play now. Hey, glad you made it to the end, and thanks for validating my Bethesda games addiction. I have a fledgling Patreon, and I would appreciate any donation there. Just pretend I'm a struggling merchant in Neon who just had to share his problems with you. But if that's too much, a like or a comment works too. How do you feel about getting addicted to Bethesda games? Do you feel like they're empty? If you enjoyed this content, hit that subscribe button to get more videos like this. My last video talked about some of the same kinds of things, so check that out too. I also made a Silent Hill 4 retrospective in the same chill style, so give that a look if you're still inclined. I'm Daniel Paul. Thanks for watching.